So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. So, we're going to continue, inshallah, from where we left off. There were a few things towards the end of what we read last week that we may need to go over. So, towards the end of the section that we read last week, there's a quote from Sayyidina Umar, quite a well-known quote from Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu about Muhasaba, which we never got around to discussing. We kind of started off, but I shared that long discussion from Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi about the fleeting thought, the fleeting attraction, or the passing desire to do something that comes into one's mind, the passing attraction, the passing affection, and so on. That moment where a person feels that something looks really good, smells really good, that they want to touch something, feel something, see something, watch something, etc., etc. And that's called a khatra. And Imam Muhasibi said that, take account of yourself at every passing thought or passing attraction that basically occurs to you. So when you have that fleeting thought of, I wish I could, or if only I could do that, or I want to do that, or etc. He's saying that at that moment it's extremely important that we are able to take account of ourselves in that moment and try to stop ourselves there. Why? Because, as Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyya says, the fleeting thought turns into a desire, which then has to be fought a lot harder, which subsequently turns into a firm intention and resolution, which then is a lot harder to kind of go back from, which basically means you're about to do things, and then eventually it turns into an action. Then an action, if repeated, turns into a habit, and then once it's a habit, it can, a habit in its worst form is an addiction, so that you end up dependent upon your habit, right? So when that happens, it's painful to let go of, right? A person suffers when they try to let go of it. So they've gone through all that stage where it's now an addiction, or a habit, but actually it just began as a fleeting thought, a fleeting attraction at that point. And the point he's making is basically to stop bad habits developing. Try to guard yourself, take account of yourself when it's just a fleeting thought. And then he says, وَرَاقِبِ اللَّهَ فِي كُلِّ نَفَسٍ. And I suppose you can say that this next sentence is a kind of is the methodology for how to take account of ourselves. So taking account of ourselves can be difficult if we have a strong attraction to what it is that faces us. But in that moment, an alternative, a more powerful state of mind is muraqabatullah. It's this idea of being mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is why it's quite appropriate that he follows up taking account of yourself with be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's almost as if meditate the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with every single breath, because that is powerful enough to overcome anything. If in any given moment a person thinks to them, if a person can get into the habit, this is a habit, right? If you can get into the habit of every time a waswasa or something of fitna presents itself to us, or something wrong that is attractive to us presents itself to us, the one thing that can probably almost certainly overpower it is to become mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that moment. To just, in that moment, just think of Allah, right? And that, you know, will probably overpower whatever it is that a person is thinking at that moment. So that's an important habit to try to develop. And then, of course, concluding with Sayyidina Umar's statement that, you know, take account of yourselves before you are taken account of, and weigh yourselves before you are weighed, and adorn yourself for the great presentation. Meaning that essentially, people who are able to, people who are self-evaluative, who take account of themselves in the dunya, essentially end up becoming people whose hisab, or whose reckoning, whose account in the akhirah ends up in good stead. It ends up in a good position, in a favorable position, because of the fact that they've lived a life of taking account of their actions. Okay. And of course, on the Day of Judgment, the account is so detailed that, you know, everything that we hear, see, think, you know, is questioned on the Day of Judgment. Inna sam'a wal basara wal fu'ada kullu ulaika kana anhu mas'ula. That indeed the hearing, the sight, and the mind, if you like, the fu'ad, the heart, the mind, are all on the Day of Judgment interrogated and questioned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَوُضِعَ الْكِتَابُ فَتَرَى الْمُجْرِمِينَ مُشْفِقِينَ مِمَّا فِيهِ وَيَقُولُونَ يَا وَيْلَتَنَا مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا. That on the Day of Judgment, the account will be presented, or placed, the book will be placed, the book of deeds will be placed, and you will see people who have wronged themselves, the mujrimun, the criminal types, the sinning types, start to fear what is recorded within the book. مُشْفِقِينَ مِمَّا فِيهَا وَيَقُولُونَ, and then as the details are presented to them, they'll say, مَا لِهَذَا الْكِتَابِ لَا يُغَادِرُ صَغِيرَةً وَلَا كَبِيرَةً إِلَّا أَحْصَاهَا. What is it with this book that it hasn't left out a big sin or the minutest of things, except that it has recorded it. So this is, you know, this is the danger of not taking account of ourselves on the Day of Judgment, that ultimately we're delaying the inevitable. The inevitable is on the Day of Judgment, there will be an account, there will be a hisab, there will be a reckoning. The Salaf had a tendency to basically take account of themselves all the time. You know, it's said of the famous said of Maymun ibn Mihran, a famous pious Imam from the Salaf, that he used to say that a slave of Allah cannot be a muttaqi, cannot be a person of taqwa, until they take account of themselves the way they take account of a business partner. The way a person, the way if two people are in business together, right, then they generally, what they tend to do, what the norm is for them to examine basically the accounts. The accounts is basically how you know that everything is in order, right? And you know that the income is correct, the expenditure is correct. There's been no kind of inappropriate or mishandling of funds. There's been no skimming, etc., etc. All of the kind of things that could happen in that kind of situation. So he said that, you know, you can't attain taqwa until you take account of your deeds in that way, as if it was to the, you know, think about an accountant going through the entries on an Excel sheet. This is how a person needs to take account of their deeds on a daily basis if they are going to be counted as among the people of taqwa. Hassan al-Basri is reported to have said that the believer is somebody who basically has control over himself, and he takes account of himself for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And indeed, the person for whom the hisab on the day of judgment will be easy, the accounting on the day of judgment will be easy, will be such people who took account of themselves in the dunya. So that is a fact. Basically, if we haven't been people who are concerned, who like a simple example is, you know, it's like if you think back to your day, you know, every single instant when you've committed a sin. Like, I would say that's a basic requirement, because if a person doesn't even know that, well, is that not a sign that they actually don't take notice of their sins, because it's not a big deal for them? They commit sins, right? So if a person can't even remember their wrongdoings in any given day, how do they make tawbah? How do they repent? And how do they avoid a sin? How can our tawbah be genuine if tawbah requires that we are regretful of the sin that we committed, that we desist from the sin, that we stop committing the sin, and that we resolve never to commit that sin again? How is that possible if a person isn't even aware that they committed the sin? Because they don't know how to take account of themselves, or they don't have that habit. So if they were to recount their day, they wouldn't know where they committed a sin, because sins come out, they manifest so easily that it becomes impossible to basically not only is it impossible to stop oneself in the moment, but a person doesn't even recall them, can't even take account of them, even if they wanted to. So these are signs to look out for, signs that a person is in danger of perhaps of Allah, and Allah forbid it and save us, inshallah, that a person is in danger of a tough hisab on the day of judgment, because they have absolutely no clue of which way their account is going in the dunya, or they have a very, very vague clue. And what that kind of means is either they're complacent because they think, oh, I'm a good person, I'm a wonderful person, and nothing else matters. And you see that attitude. One person once said to me, all of those details. I think they were commenting on me praying during work time, and I was like desperately looking for somewhere I could make wudu and stuff. And they were saying, yeah, I get that you're religious, but for me, all that matters is like I'm a good person in my heart. So this is the kind of complacency mindset. And on the other hand, you have another person who's so kind of given up that for them it's like, forget about taking account of myself, I'm done for anyway, so might as well enjoy life. The point is that neither of these extremes are acceptable. It's a question of habit, that taking account of ourselves isn't about judging ourselves, but it's about being in the habit of caring and being concerned that I don't want to be committing any sins, and if I do, I want to know what they are, and I want to basically repent on a sin by sin basis. Okay, and that really should be the aim of every single Muslim. Right. The rattling noise was my son. He was sitting there next to me watching as I teach and turning the pages of his drawing book. All right, so I muted for a second just to tell him to go next door. You can hear me now again, right? I've unmuted the sound. No, it's all right, inshallah, no problem. So he's got plenty of space. He just wanted to sit there and just be next to me. It's fine. Okay, so I've not read any new text, so let's read some new text, inshallah. So Imam Muhasibi says, وَخَفِ اللَّهَ فِي دِينِكَ وَارْجُهُ فِي جَمِيعِ أُمُورِكَ وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ قال علي رضي الله عنه لا تخف إلا ذنبك ولا ترجو إلا ربك ولا يستحي الذي لا يعلم أن يسأل حتى يعلم ولا يستحي من يسأل عما لا يعلم أن يقول لا أعلم. Okay, so slightly disparate points there. So he says, and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to your deen. So having said that, he then mentions a few different points. So he says, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to your deen, and have hope in him in all of your affairs. In all of your affairs, have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, i.e. because, of course, whatever the affair is, whatever the difficulty is, whatever the problem is, whatever the concern is, whatever the regret is, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one that can remedy. So have hope in Allah in all of your affairs, and have patience over any difficulty that that befalls you, any musibah, any calamity that befalls you. And then he quotes Ali radiallahu anhu as saying, don't fear anything but your own sin. Don't only fear your own sin, and don't have hope in anyone except your Lord. And let not the one who needs to ask a question, let not the one who needs to ask a question feel any embarrassment from asking the question, so that they can know. Meaning, and this is where we get the principle. When we were studying, we used to often be taught by our teachers that there is no haya in knowledge. There is no embarrassment in seeking knowledge. So this is attributed to Ali radiallahu anhu, that he said, anybody who needs to ask a question, let them not feel embarrassed to asking that question, so that they can know. And anybody who is asked a question should not feel any shame in saying they do not know an answer if they do not truly know an answer. So, you know, this is the balance. Somebody who doesn't know should continue to ask and inquire until they know, i.e. continue to seek knowledge through questioning until they know and understand. Somebody who's being asked a question should say, I don't know, if they don't know. If they do know, then they should share. All right, because then it becomes kitmanul ilm. So on the one hand, the Prophet ﷺ has warned against hiding knowledge that you do have. And on the other hand, the Prophet ﷺ, and on the other hand, there is also the warning of, in the Quran, of speaking of matters that we have no knowledge of. لا تقف ما ليس لك به علم. It's actually I mentioned the latter part of the verse earlier when I said that the hearing and the sight and the mind will be questioned on the Day of Judgment. The first part of the same verse is, do not pursue that of which you have no knowledge. And that includes commenting and answering and so on about on things that one has no knowledge of. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that that hearing, seeing, and our minds will be questioned on the day of judgment, interrogated on the Day of Judgment. So these are some general wisdoms. What I want to basically just quickly mention is hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolute, meaning our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be so powerful that we can hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of his complete discretion, can solve all of our problems and forgive all of our sins and give us Jannah without any reckoning. So our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a hope in Allah's absolute independent will, and therefore his absolute ability to simply act according to his mercy and forgive, or to act out of his generosity and just give, and so on, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's our hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet at the same time, because of our own weaknesses and limitations, and because of our own sins, etc., our fear also should be so profound that we could be punished in the dunya. We could be taken to account here and now for the wrong that we have done, and a single sin that we have committed with the wrong state of mind, perhaps with a very kind of calculated deliberateness, can become the reason why on the Day of Judgment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes us to task. So there is a kind that both of them need to be equally strong, so that there is a kind of balancing act, if you like. There's a kind of balance. There's this tightrope situation between hope on the one hand and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice on the other hand. And then Sayyidina Ali basically kind of, that quote, what that quote is suggesting is really one of the reasons why we should fear is because we do commit sin, right? And our sin is the reason why we should fear. It's because we are remiss in fulfilling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rights, fulfilling the rights of Allah's creation, fulfilling the obligation of khilafah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, that we should be fearful. Yet in the face of that fear, the only hope that we have is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because ultimately Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that will take us to account for our actions. Okay, I'm going to move forward inshallah. And then Imam Muhasibi says, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الصَّبْرَ مِنَ الْإِيمَانِ بِمَنْزِلَةِ الرَّأْسِ مِنَ الْجَسَدِ فإذا قطع الرأس ذهب الجسد وإذا سمعت كلمة تغضبك في عرضك فاعف واصفح فإن ذلك من عزم الأمور. قال عمر بن الخطاب رضي الله تعالى عنه: من خاف الله لم يشف غيظه ومن اتقاه لم يصنع ما يريد ولولا يوم القيامة لكان غير ما ترون. He says that know that patience, the position of patience in one's faith. So the position of patience in one's faith, in one's iman, is like the position of the head to the body. So so in the body, if you use this analogy, so in the body, the head has this controlling, the brain, with the brain in it, has this controlling role. It has this role that on the one hand, visibly the head has the greatest respect, commands the greatest respect. It receives the greatest attention. It receives the most, it's what is gazed upon the most. And at the same time, the head is also what contains the brain, which basically regulates and controls the whole body, right? So just as the position of the head to the rest of the body is one of leading and controlling and regulating, and therefore it has this central position and this importance. Similarly is the position of iman as a quality, as a quality compared to the rest of the qualities of iman. So there are two things here. One, patience is an attribute of iman, because patience is a sign of iman, of course. So you have iman. Iman is basically all of these branches, right? The Prophet ﷺ taught us that iman is many branches. Al-iman bid'un wa sab'una shu'ba. Iman is, more than 70 branches. The highest is la ilaha illallah. The lowest is removing something harmful from the street, right? And then in some narrations he said, "Wal haya'u shu'batun min al-iman." Modesty is a branch of iman. So now, so that basically means that iman isn't just is an entity, is a reality that is made up of this multitude, all of these branches that are basically a mixture of many different attributes that manifest themselves in certain behaviors, certain modes of conduct, certain actions, right? Sabr is one of them. And here Imam Muhasibi is saying that sabr is so important that it's like the head. Out of all of those branches, sabr is like, if you want to understand how important sabr is, well, think about how important your head is to your body, basically. So why? Because if you think about what sabr does, right? What is sabr? And there's that 3-stage explanation of sabr. That sabr is, on the one hand, steadfastness upon good deeds. On the other hand, it is resilience against, defense against sin. So on the one hand, sabr is as-sabru ala ta'a, is one's ability to remain steadfast on obeying Allah. Then sabr is as-sabru an al-ma'siyah, is one's ability to restrain and refrain for it, to restrain oneself and refrain from disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another definition of sabr is as-sabru عند المصائب, is to be patient at the time of difficulties, at the time of calamities, at the time of trials. Normally we understand sabr to be just the patient, being patient at the time of trials. But no, it has these three aspects to it. And if you think of it in that sense, then absolutely it makes sense that it is so powerful. Also, sabr is the quality that as an attribute stops us from committing sins, because of the fact that we are a bit, that essentially we become our reactionary sins are reduced significantly because we have patience. Because we have patience, we don't react as much, right? So therefore, sabr also has that quality. And if you balance out most people, most good people, most Muslims, inshallah ta'ala, right, I can say, most of us, we do good deeds during the day, right? There is enough good in us, inshallah ta'ala, that we're doing some good deeds during the day. What we're let down by is our sins, right? Whether they are of a mental nature, of an inner nature, or an outer nature. You know, sometimes our sins are mental. Sometimes, you know, we have bad opinions of other people. We feel jealousy towards people. These are sins. Even though they are feelings, they are still sins. On the other hand, there is also sins that are physical in nature, that are verbal in nature, that are financial in nature, etc., etc. There are sins of thought. Okay, so sins are what basically let us down. Essentially, if a person's sabr stops them from committing sins, then they basically go into each day with a clean slate. You're basically going to each day with a clean slate. All you're doing, you're not in minus. Sins take a person into the minus, and you're kind of constantly playing catch up. Being able to avoid sins means that you're at least able to build from zero up. Everything that you have basically is what gets added to your account because of the fact that you started from zero, because there's no sin. Obviously, that's very, very difficult. As human beings, we forget and we have these weaknesses. But it is still a quality that we try to build, and we minimize and minimize and minimize as much as we can by taking account of ourselves and becoming and developing in us the will and the resolve and the steadfastness to be able to basically refrain. So that is the power of sabr, and this is why this example is given of sabr is like the head. And then he says, if the head is cut off, then the body is gone. The body becomes useless, and that is the same as a person who loses their patience. It's as if they lost their head, and essentially that's what we say, don't we, in English? We say he's lost his head, he's lost his patience. Right? That's interesting, isn't it? Anyway, وَإِذَا سَمِعْتَ كَلِمَةً تُبْغِضُكَ, he says, if you hear a word from someone that makes you angry because it harms, because it affects your pride, كَلِمَةً تُبْغِضُكَ فِي عِرْضِكَ, that if you hear a word from someone that makes you angry due to your pride, because it's hurt your pride, then try to pardon and forego, right? I.e., just don't take the offense as the offense appears to have been intended. So you kind of deflect it away, right? You pardon and you kind of wipe it off, right? You just wipe it off the slate. Why? Because the word actually, the words are harmful, right? And people do feel them, but ultimately they're not. And it should be relatively easy for us to kind of pardon and forego. And he says that فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, the ability to do that, you should do it knowing that the ability to do that is a quality of great resolve, right? Azm al-umur is sometimes a phrase used to describe things that are like of the highest order, qualities that are of the highest order. It's how the great prophets are described. Ulul azmi min al-rusul. Fasbir kama sabara ulul azmi min al-rusul. Patience in the context of patience, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, have patience the way the the messengers of great resolve, right, had patience. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam is being asked to emulate the patience of past prophets who were known to be prophets of great resolve. So that basically phrase, the idea of azam, and he says, فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ مِنْ عَزْمِ الْأُمُورِ, that is from the affairs, from the matters of, or the qualities of great resolve. If a person's patience is such that they're able to just forgo and pardon when somebody says something that is hurtful or offensive to them. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu says, whoever fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never act upon their anger. Whoever will not, lam yashfi ghaydah, will never satisfy their anger. Whoever fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never satisfy their anger. وَمَنِ اتَّقَاهُ, and whoever is conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can never do whatever they want. Right? There's no such thing as, I want to have the freedom to do what I want, kind of this, the mantra and motto of the liberal age, right? He said it's completely contrary to taqwa. Whoever has taqwa, they will never do whatever they want, right? It's never possible to do whatever we want, because our taqwa is constantly restricting what we can do, right? And then he says, وَلَوْلَا يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ لَكَانَ غَيْرَ مَا تَرَوْنَ, and had it not been for the day of judgment, you would see that things are nothing like the way what you are seeing now. And here I've wondered about what is meant by this statement, but my understanding, one way of understanding this statement, that if it wasn't for the day of judgment, then things wouldn't be the way you see them, they'd be different. What he means by that, perhaps in his context, is of course they were people who were born into a kind of a religious context where people didn't believe in the Qiyamah, right? Sayyidina Umar and Islam then introduced the idea of resurrection and an afterlife to them. That was one of the main messages of Islam that contradicted the beliefs of the mushrikun of Mecca. And Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu is basically here. He is explaining the importance of believing in the day of judgment, believing in Qiyamah, not believing in Qiyamah, but the importance of the existence of Qiyamah. The fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us an afterlife. He says, if it wasn't for that, the world would be different to what you see it now. If people didn't believe in an afterlife, if that didn't exist, if that wasn't there, right, then the world would be a place where people would basically would just simply do whatever they wanted and act without responsibility or without any accountability. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, inshallah ta'ala, and then read some more next week. I'll take your questions. Barakallahu feekum. Brothers and sisters, if you have any questions, let's go through them, inshallah. Remember, it can be about the topic or it can be anything else. I kind of wrapped up a bit early today because I've been conscious of the fact that I've not been giving much time to questions in the past. If there's no questions, I'm going to carry on and make some progress, inshallah. Yeah. All right. So Imam Muhasibi says, "Wara'i hammak," and I carry on reading. So وراعي همك واشتغل بإصلاح نفسك عن عيب غيرك فإنه كان يقال كفى بالمرء عيبا أن يستبين له من الناس ما يخفى عليه من نفسه أو يمقت الناس فيما يأتي مثله أو يؤذي جليسه أو يقول في الناس ما لا يعنيه واستعمل لله عقلك بترك التدبير واستعن بالله على صرف المقادير. قال علي رضي الله تعالى عنه: يا ابن آدم لا تفرح بالغنى ولا تقنط بالفقر ولا تحزن بالبلاء ولا تفرح بالرخاء فإن الذهب يجرب بالنار وإن العبد الصالح يجرب بالبلاء وإنك لا تنال ما تريد إلا بترك ما تشتهي ولن تبلغ ما تؤمل إلا بالصبر على ما تكره وابذل جهدك لرعاية ما افترض عليك وارض بما أرادك الله به. قال ابن مسعود رضي الله تعالى عنه ارضى بما قسم الله لك تكن من أغنى الناس واجتنب ما حرم الله عليك تكن من أورع الناس وأدي ما افترض الله عليك تكن من أعبد الناس. That was a long passage. I'm not sure if I can get through all of it, inshallah. Maybe just up to that statement from Ali radiallahu anhu. He says, and always take care of your decisions, right? Of your intentions and decisions. And this is slightly repetitive, but he's kind of reaffirming that point about intentions and decisions and being careful and cautious about them. So وراعي همك واشتغل بإصلاح نفسك and be very busy, keep yourself busy in rectifying yourself, in your own islah, in your own rectification. You know, I often say that essentially our whole life should be defined by continuous self-improvement. This is it. That is the mission of our life. واشتغل بإصلاح نفسك. Be busy in correcting yourself and improving yourself, and let that keep you away from the faults of others. So there's the way this is phrased is so the best way to reflect the kind of the way it's put in Arabic is to not say keep busy, but to use the term to use the word preoccupy. So keep yourself preoccupied with rectifying yourself so that you are not preoccupied with the faults of others, right? So this is, you know, extremely kind of pertinent in an age where everybody's obsessed with everybody else, right? So it's a social media driven world where people are just obsessed with others, right? We're constantly talking about other people, we're constantly obsessed about other people, we're constantly in other people's lives, to the extent that it's become so culturally acceptable that people now are making a living. It's like, oh, since people are so interested in other people's lives, let me make some money out of their interest. And now you end up with, you know, reality TV, you end up with people literally living their lives on YouTube and so on, and getting millions of followers, because people are so obsessed with others. It's like they don't live, they haven't got a life to live, so they live their lives through the lives lived by others. And then that becomes a point of conversation, etc., because then they're not comfortable engaging in a kind of reflection about themselves. They're not, themselves isn't a satisfactory enough preoccupation, because there's nothing interesting. They take an external interest in others. So but when it comes to the faults, when it comes to self-improvement and so on, a person should be so busy that they've got no time for anyone else, right? So busy improving myself, so busy, you know, remaining steadfast on my good deeds and building up my resilience against sins and so on and so forth, that I've got no time for anybody else. Sufyan ibn Hussein al-Wasiti once said that I mentioned I mentioned a person in front of Iyas ibn Muawiyah al-Muzani, who was the Qadi of Basra. So he says, I mentioned a person kind of in negative terms. So he basically criticized a person. He mentioned, you know, like, so, oh, you know, so I don't really like this person, or such and such did this, or, you know, those types of comments. Iyas ibn Muawiyah al-Muzani he's a qadi. He's from among the tabi'is. So you know, somebody who met the Sahaba. So he looks so this Sufyan ibn Hussein al-Wasiti, who mentioned this person negatively, he says, he looks at me and looks at my face and he says, have you fought the Romans? Have you fought the Romans? As in, obviously in those days the Romans were kind of in Egypt. He says, have you fought the Romans? And he says, no. He says, what about the Sindhis and the Indians and the Turks? Have you fought any of them? He says, the guy's confused and he's like, and he says, no. I said, no, I haven't fought any of them. So he says, أفسلم منك الروم والسند والهند والترك ولم يسلم منك أخوك المسلم. He says, so you haven't fought any of those people. All of them are somehow safe from you. Allah has, you've managed to keep all of them safe from your harm, but your own Muslim brother couldn't be safe from you. That you have the point. None of your own Muslim brother isn't safe from you. That you had to basically harm him by mentioning his ill to me. Why did you have to harm your Muslim brother in that way? Right? Because the whole world is safe from you, but your own Muslim brother, you had to cause harm to him by mentioning him in negative terms in front of me. Why would you plant this negative thought towards this other person in my head? That is a harm caused to that person. Does that make sense? So this is the point about, if we're preoccupied with our own islah, preoccupied with rectifying our own faults, improving ourselves, then we're not so interested in other people. So Sufyan says that, Sufyan al-Hussein al-Wasiti said that I never ever basically did that again. I never mentioned one person's fault to another person. I once saw one of my teachers willing to hit someone, actually hit someone with a stick. This was in Bangladesh, because of the fact that he mentioned, he made this, the comment was like this, he said, so when they go to sheikhs and the sheikhs and people say, oh, I have this illness, etc., and they blow on you, read some Quran or something, and they blow on you and stuff, right? They do ruqya, that kind of thing. And this guy basically said, all he said was, Sheikh, when we come to you for these things, it always works. These other people, their stuff doesn't work. That was it. Just because he said that, he got so upset that he was willing to, we thought that he was going to swing. He was very elderly, little man, really old. And he used to have a walking stick. And he got so upset that we thought he was going to hit him with his walking stick. And he kept saying, he said in Bengali, I'll repeat the Bengali for you guys, for the Bengali guys in the crowd. He said something along the lines of, he said, who told you to come here and mention other people's faults to me? Right? And the reason why he was getting upset was because the guy kept repeating himself. So he says, who told you to come and mention other people's faults to me? And the guy goes, no, I'm just praising you. I'm just saying your stuff works and their stuff doesn't work. And the chef's getting more and more infuriated, because it's like, hello, are you not listening? I don't want to hear other people. I don't want to hear you back chat other people and tell me whether their stuff works or not. I'm not interested in them. Anyway, so, but the point is that they weren't willing to, there was no patience. So I only took ijaza from this sheikh. His name is Sheikh Nuruddin, very famous sheikh in Bangladesh. His name is Nuruddin Ghorpuri. Little man from my neck of the woods in Sylhet, right? So I only took ijaza from him in Sahih Bukhari. But our regular classes used to be with a student of his, like a senior student, somebody who he taught from when he was much younger, called Shaykh Abdul Aziz Duhamili. So Shaykh Abdul Aziz was my regular teacher in Bukhari and Tirmidhi. So he was with us. He was observing from the back, and me and a fellow student who'd also gone from the UK, who's now very well known to many of you, Sheikh Hassan Ali. We were kind of sitting behind this guy who had who had offended the Sheikh in that way. And we were getting really scared because Hassan was actually in the queue to go to him and complain about something, basically, because he was suffering from back pain. I'm sure he won't mind me telling you this story because he tells it publicly as well. So so he's got back pain. I'm okay, so I don't have any reason to go and see him. So I'm just there to say salam, etc. And Sheikh Hassan wants to talk to him about his back pain. And then we see what happens, man. So we're getting really worried. We're thinking, oh my God, he's going to be in a bad mood and so on. And I'm kind of towards Sheikh Abdulaziz, and Sheikh Abdulaziz says to me, he whispers to me and says, he can't handle it. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, the Sheikh can't handle people backbiting before him because he can't tolerate it. Because he feels as though you just handed me a whole bunch of sin. What did I do to deserve that? Why did you have to do that to me? So he gets really, really agitated when people backbite and speak about other people, speak ill of other people. Anyway, Sheikh Hassan got 3 slaps on his back for the back pain, by the way. And it went away from the next day. I can't explain it, but that's basically what happened. Anyway. Strange, huh? 3 slaps on the back and that's it. Your back pain's gone the next day. And he was back to his cheery self, by the way. So as soon as we kind of moved forward, and Hassan was sitting in front of him, he was back to his cheery self. He said, what can I do for you? And he said, I've been having back pain. And he said, inshallah, don't worry, we'll go. And he grabs him, pulls him forward, and slaps him on the back 3 times. And we were thinking, like, what was that about? Next day, I asked Hassan, we were in 2 different institutions, right? So we meet up and he says to me, it wasn't next, we met up a bit later, but he says to me that from the next day, basically, because I can't believe it, it's gone. Pain's completely gone. So it's ajib. These people have karamat. These are karamat of awliya that I spoke to you about once, I think. I think so. I don't know sometimes which part I discussed in which class, but yeah, we believe in karamat of awliya. That the friends of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have karamat, these things that happen unexplainably and miraculously at their hands. And I know and I've heard enough about Shaykh Nuruddin to know that he was a person of karamat. Anyway, so where was I? Yes. So, one is to keep yourself preoccupied with your own, with improving yourself and rectifying your own sins, so that you remain unpreoccupied and uninterested in other people. And he says that it used to be said, like as a word of wisdom, it used to be said, "Kafa bil mar'i ayban." I really like this. He says it used to be said that it is a sufficient flaw in a person, meaning this is like, if this was the, like, sometimes we say in our colloquial that, like, like if you could have one bad quality, right, then this would be enough. Yeah. And he says it's enough as a flaw, it's sufficient as a flaw, a aib in a person, that the faults that they fail to see in themselves, they see clearly in others. The faults that they fail to see in themselves, they have a fault, but they fail to see that fault in themselves, but yet are always able to notice the same flaw in other people. So I have a fault, right? So let's use that same example, right? I always notice when other people backbite, right? But never notice when I do it. Yeah? I always notice when other people swear, never notice when I do it. I always notice when other people, act jealous, and I comment on it, but never notice my own jealousy, right? Always notice and comment on other people's bad temper but never notice my own, and so on and so forth, basically. So he says that is, that aib on its own is enough as a flaw in a person, so that if they had no other flaw and this was it, then this would be bad enough. So this is just a wisdom. And he says, or that, and he continues, or that a person hates in others what he himself does. Similar kind of statement. He hates in other people what he himself does. So it's like, they feel outraged when other people do something, but it's actually something that they themselves do. It's a sin that they themselves commit. It's a habit that they themselves have, but they're outraged when other people do it. Or he says it's sufficient, if that a person should cause harm to people who sit around him, right? So this one is, they say that if people, the people around, like, we should be such that people around us are feel noticeably better, they're kind of noticeably positively impacted by our presence. The opposite of that is that your presence around people, whether at work or just sitting next to them on a train or a bus, that you being next to them harms them in some way or other. And he says that is a terrible, terrible quality to have, that somehow or other you have this tendency to basically, a person has this ability to just spend a small amount of time around others, but somehow they manage to harm them, right? And it could be anything, but they harm them, basically. It could be because of the way they speak, conduct. It could be because they disturb other people. It could be just simple things like they smell, right? This was just not taking care of oneself, so that one's breath smells and there's one's clothes smell and so on and so forth. Was the Prophet ﷺ considered it to be either. It was one of the reasons why he recommended that people don't come to the masjid after having eaten onions, right? Or that people regularly showered and so on, so that their body odor didn't harm other people. So it could be even something as simple as that, right? But rather that no form, our objective should be, our aim should be that no form of harm comes to those, to the people that we interact with, and to the people that are around us. It could be anything, like it could be because we do things that are bad, thinking that they're acceptable, right? Because we've just developed a kind of an immunity against it. So like, foul language is bad. It's from a Shari'i point of view, it's bad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes people. Mentioned it before, right? But a person uses it so much they become completely immune to it. But other people aren't like that. Other people don't like that. So therefore, hearing the way you speak, basically, it causes other people harm. It's a disturbance, because they find it really difficult to hear that kind of language. But you're just having a chat with the person next to you, but it's really disgusting for another person to hear because of the way that a person speaks. So even at that level, basically, it's a aib to do things in ways, or to be such that one causes harm to those around them. Or he says, أو يقول في الناس ما لا يعني. Another really bad aib is that we speak about people. So we indulge in idle talk, things that are completely useless idle talk, basically wasting our own time and wasting other people's time. That's another aib. So he's mentioning a few things that are basically aib that Muslims need to avoid. Okay, inshallah. So I'll stop there. It's already 35 past. Okay. I kind of started reading the next paragraph, but it turned out to be really, really long because of this long statement from Ali radiallahu anhu. So we'll do that next week, inshallah. What have you guys been saying? Saturday's class was about Iman. Just seeing it. Saturday's class was about Iman. Yeah, social media. Yeah, sorry, you're just commenting. Okay. So social media is definitely an example of obsessing about other people. If I have relatives and family members, they might not listen to me, and not everybody has. But if I have relatives and family members that are active on social media personally, in the sense that they're sharing their personal life, I don't like it. I tend to tell them, not to do that. Why? Sharing pictures of your children on social media, all for, doesn't make any sense, right? So, okay, I totally understand if your Facebook page is restricted to your friends and family, yeah, then I get it, but it shouldn't go beyond that. Because if you have nothing to promote, like, I get a business page, I understand that, right? I get people who do it for da'wah. I get people who have something to share, who have a mission, who have something to propagate, etc., etc. That is, that is productive in some way. But why would you project yourself? It doesn't make any sense, right? And it's strange because you've got one group of people who are kind of projecting their egos out to the world, and then you've got all of these other people. They are the market. They've developed this quality of taking an interest in other people to such an extreme that is a marketplace. That's a 21st century marketplace, right? That makes people money. It's just ajib, it's bizarre. Anyway, I don't know, Brother Naveed is commenting about Sheikh Nuruddin and Shifa, but I don't know in what context. Yeah, so Saturday's classes are about Iman. I think at one point we talked about Karamat, but it was, I can't remember exactly what the content was, but oh yes, we talked about Karamat because in one of the articles of Iman, we talk about Mu'jiza as one of the signs of the prophets. So we speak about, there's a brief kind of mention of Karamat in that context, but no, it's not discussed in any kind of detail. Yeah, that was the context, this is in it. I did, but it was very brief though. It was kind of in passing because we were talking about Mu'jiza. Yeah? All right. Okay, well, if there aren't any questions, let's close here, inshallah ta'ala. And salam to everybody on Facebook if you're watching. And I'll try and do this every week, inshallah. But this is the nature of the class, it's not like there's a group of people who are enrolled. Some attend every week live, others listen to the recordings. If you want access to the live class and the recordings, then of all of the previous sessions right from the beginning, I think we're on the 6th or the 7th session now. Then just enroll. It doesn't cost you anything. It's free. Inshallah. Just go to the link that's there on Facebook. Right. I think my previous post was about this as well with the link. And just enroll, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, and I'll see you all next week. All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Sallallahu ta'ala wa sallam Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Oh, my son's sitting there watching and getting bored. Yes, I'm down and bored in the corner.